we've been joined in the studio actually by Samuel Dubik Mahama, who is the managing director of the ECG. He's a man with all the answers on this day, and we're happy that he's been able to join us in the studio. Mr. Mahama, thanks so much for joining us. And should I say congrats on reaching some agreement with the IPP so that so that we are not, thrown into the doomsday, the dreaded doomsday. But tell us what went into that arrangement. They said they wanted 30% payment, or at least payment plan for the 30%, whilst the rest of the debt was dealt with. We are not sure whether you provided that plan, but all we know from the statement issued from their side is that some arrangement has been reached. Can you tell us really what went into this and what you were able to reach with them, the agreement you're able to reach with them?
First of all, I'd like to again thank the IPPs for the conversations. And, to a lot of people, I decided not to comment and not to say anything to the run-up to this whole thing because I just felt we needed to take our time. And whenever someone has given you a deadline or an ultimatum, he'll run the whole ultimatum until the last day to see if he can get something better than what's been offered. So it was a very healthy conversation. It's been a very healthy conversation. As much as they decided not to spill out the details because we have a few more things to do together as partners in growth to get to the final line, we have decided that by the end of the week, certain conclusions will have to be reached and certain documents signed, and then the necessary disbursement concerning cash would happen. But let's look at this in this holistic form. The IPPs are our growth partners. We cannot do without them. Yes, to some extent, some of the decisions that we're taking do not benefit the country. Others do. So we are at a point where it's unique, but it's a special time that through all of this adversity, we can turn it all around. When somebody sits down and says, it's not the take or pay, it's not the take or pay, you should ask the person why. Because you've contracted beyond a certain capacity. So that means in the end, if the average Ghanaian pays the exact energy you sold to them, the idle capacity
have to be paid for.
Who would pay for the idle capacity? In its simplest form, there's the energy consumed. With energy consumed comes with some level of capacity to be used and fuel. So to calculate energy consumed, you have to add some capacity. It's like a car engine. If you're speeding, you're probably using all the V8. If you're not speeding, you're probably using less. So whatever you use to, let's say, bring out whichever energy, let's not talk about the capacity that was never used. Because if you put it all together, that capacity that was never used constitutes almost 60-some+% of the bill. So we find out that, yes, there's a bill on the table. Let's ring fence that. And then let's look at how to stay current and go forward. So that was some of the major conversations that we had that has given us a proper growth plan, an idea as to how we should go about it in the next few weeks and the next few months for us to be able to stay current. I believe if anybody says it's not possible to abolish look, 40% take or pay is not the same as 100% take or pay. Don't kid yourself. So if you say, yeah, even the new one that was signed, there's some level of take or pay in it, what are you comparing? You're not comparing the right. The new one that was signed with AXA doesn't have a government guarantee. It doesn't have a standby LC. It was a unique opportunity for the country to take charge of something that if the person has to so I say we don't want decommission and take your plant away. Meanwhile, maybe in about 4 to 5 years' time, we will need this such installed capacity. So those were all conversations that we needed to make. But, Salam, the job ECG has to do is in three folds. It has a social component, it has an operational component, and it has a finance component. So within all these three, when does ECG have to become a profit-oriented company? Or when does ECG have to be a social-oriented company? You have people say we don't have electricity in our villages. When are you supposed to reach those ones? You understand? The only way to go forward is to find a perfect blend between these three. If you leave it solely on finances, you would get it wrong. What we sought to do with these IPPs was to find a perfect mix throughout these three. which we've arrived at something that works for the nation. So we are currently at a point where in the next few weeks, we would agree on something that is feasible, that works, that creates certainty within the sector. Because if I hadn't occupied this chair, I wouldn't have even known that electricity is seasonal. You think it's not because you are consuming, but it is seasonal. It's cold. So your level of consumption has dropped.
That's true.
You understand? So that means revenue has what?
Gone down.
So nobody factors all of these things end to end. But we need to find a way to make sure that there's a minimum figure that they receive solely based on ECG's operations. And then based on that, we can plan moving forward. Because with the grid impact assessment, after we think we have excess, we don't. Very soon, in about 3 to 4 years' time, all that excess will be gone. And we'll be consuming at 100% on all the power plants. So we cannot afford to lose any of them, but rather we need to give them that level of comfort and that level of respect for them to stay and work with us because they are development partners.
The other issue that has come up really tied to this is, you mentioned operational and finance. People think that we are in this because of the inefficiencies in the ECG's system. That will be operational. And that about 30% of the losses, we suffer about 30% losses in distribution, and that hugely affects the debt we have today. I know you've implemented quite a number of things. For example, the revenue collection drive and all of that. What can you tell us about how much you have and how are you applying that to the current debt we have with the IPPs?
So, in truth, whoever says that is true. I'm not going to deny that fact. ECG's inefficiencies are also contributing to the factor. But let's not drop the problem at all in ECG's doorstep. Why is the average Ghanaian also consuming and deciding not to pay?
But there is the ECG's job to identify those people and make them pay.
That is the mistake. What you just said is the mistake. Let's plug this same person from Ghana
and take him
situate him in the UK.
Because the systems will force him to pay.
Wait. Not the systems is not even forcing you. Well, at the end of the month, you know
that you have to pay.
You will not even wait for any system to come for you. You understand? But it's our mindset. Our mindset is making that loss what it is today. Look, after the last population and housing, not to run away from your question, I'm just showing you what we are missing. By the way, the IPPs are not even expecting us to pay them the entire amount. The Ashantis have a proverb, Kafu Didi. They are expecting you to pay some and to stay current on your obligations. Nobody is expecting you to
pay everything.
So, how do we close this gap? The last population and housing census says 8.5 million households. ECG, after my PMO directorate looked at the whole thing, came up and said we should have 7.2 million households. But in the ECG billing system, which was given to us by the same IMF, the World Bank in 2015, which is misfiring, which is in Oracle 9, and Oracle is in 22 now, says ECG's total customer base is 4.5 million.
4.5, when you're actually expecting 7.2.
Oh, wait, 4.5 million? The 4.5 million is a mix of residential and what? Commercial. So if I'm missing 2 million, how many commercial am I missing? Now, these are people that clearly are drawing from the grid and are not what?
Paying.
We started an exercise between Kwabenya, Adenta, and Ebuekwa in the Ashanti region. We discovered over 54,000 customers that we didn't know of.
Wow.
So let's play with 4 million. Okay? Then let's drop half it. We've come up with a new policy called the flat rate policy, where per the averages, the average Ghanaian home spends about 600 cedis. So if I see you don't have a meter, I regularize you, I register you, I put you on a flat rate of 600. But it's categorized in urban, peri-urban, and rural. But even in the urban, categories of homes and all of that are different. So we are making arrangements for some. Not everybody can be on 600. Some have to be higher. But let's take the 600 and multiply even by 2 million. That's 1.2 billion in monthly revenue lost. Take it that let's say even the Citi to dollar is 12. It's less. That's $100 million.
That's a lot.
Why are we doing this to our own selves?
So mindset, attitudinal matters, etc. But we need someone to stand behind them with a stick. That if you don't do it,
that's how we were brought up. That's how we were brought up. That's the headmaster approach is what everybody seems to feel like. But that shouldn't be the case.
But that has to be the case because the how do you call it, the persuasion approach is not working. Or where you leave us to think for ourselves is not working. So maybe the ECG must get back onto the ground like you are now, forcing the people working with the security agencies.
We are about to start.
So that those who are caught are dealt with. When they are dealt with, they go through the process.
So even to help you, I'm calling it an amnesty period. If you know you are consuming power, I'm calling it a moratorium, amnesty, call it whatever you want to call it. Let's find you. Let's register you. You cannot consume at zero. You have to pay something. Because at least little drops of water would get us to where we need to get to. Other than that, you and I are paying for those other people. There's a price tag for rural, so rural folk will have to pay theirs. Because we gave them SHEP meters, and some of them call it political meters. And as my brother Ben says, there's a meter called abortion meter. It's there with nothing in it. You understand? How do we close these gaps? So now we are putting boots on the ground. It's going to be 2 months intensive. We have to claw all of these people back. You are in a kiosk, you are consuming, you have to pay. Whatever you're doing that involves electricity, you have to pay. An assessment will be done and you will be put on a flat rate. Now the obligation is on you. When you are leaving, you have to inform us. If you find yourself somewhere else, you have to inform us so that debt doesn't travel with you. Because if you don't take care, the debt will travel with you. Because that's what we need to do now. Because our level of responsibility, we always drop it at government's doorstep. But I'm being honest with you, the company ECG itself should be able to do something massively that would let everybody know that, okay, what's the gap? Government, what gap is government supposed to take? Because right now, if you ask me what is the gap that government is supposed to take, I'm not able to say. Because until I fix that portion of it and bring it forward, what are we doing to ourselves? To come back to your question, we went on a revenue mobilization drive. We got what we had to get. Within that same period, there were some maintenance issues within the sector. So we had to put some resources of what we had to ascertain, to get liquid fuels so that we could keep the power running. So yes, that also led to everybody within the food chain having to be shortchanged to some level. But that being said, we are in a phase where we are turning our operational mechanisms to become efficient, like a 21st century utility company. Our dynamism in digitalizing the whole system is what's going to close the gap quickly. Because after I got the data, one of my first problems were, is it the tariff increment or is it the operational things you've clocked? I'd rather say it's the operational because I cannot speak to the tariff.
The tariffs.
So I have said at every moment for myself that I don't believe in tariff increments. But I do believe that the tariff should be adjusted in terms of forex.
Okay.
Because the electricity is bought in dollars, sold in cedis, and then has to be paid in dollars.
Because a huge part of the bill is also due to forex losses.
Exactly. So the forex loss aspect of it should be looked at by the PURC and then managed. But as to tariff increment for now, I lack the moral right to tell you that because I am operationally inept,
then
you should pay more.
So you think you can tighten the operational side, which would in the end raise the revenue?
If it raises it and there's still a shortfall, that's when we discuss tariff increment.
One of my guests, Dr. Suleimana, mentioned that it will do the ECG a lot of good and the country generally if certain aspects of the ECG are liberalized or privatized. You are the man there. What do you think about this suggestion? I know it's come up in many forms, and I think Bemboachi also alluded to that.
It is too early for anybody to say that. Now, if you're privatizing a company from what I've just said, the main asset of the company is what? Customers. If you don't have the true customer numbers and you give it out, what have you done? You've given somebody a gold mine. So maybe, as I'm saying, I'm not saying they're wrong. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. I'm saying, let's mop up these issues on the base that we have not been doing. After we've mopped it up and it's sitting there, then we take a critical look and say, okay, now we cannot do it. Let's private sector take over.
But people argue that when PDS came, things were a bit better. But when we took over again from the PDS, things started going south.
Do you want us to compare figures? Because ECG is doing far better now than when it was under PDS.
So that's not a factual statement?
It's not a factual statement anymore. So in everything, is a conversation is about how you want to run the place or leadership. ECG is doing far better now than the PDS period. So that's for that conversation. Let's hang it here. And that's what I'm saying. There are certain operational dynamics that if we fix today and we realize that there's still these gaps in it, that's when we have to what? Say, okay, then let's privatize or let's do X, Y, and Z. But in all fairness, if we do not know ECG's customer numbers, why are we giving out the company?
That's a very good point. Just a final one, and we ran out of time. I know you want to chip in, but I mean, he came in late and he's a man. So let's give him the 2-3 minutes left. There were some concerns yesterday that government was dealing with the IPPs individually in a discriminatory and selective fashion. You were one of the guys in the meeting, I guess. What do you say? John Jinapo and Co. Said that. What can you tell us about that?
I would beg my elder brother that we are in a very unique situation. He shouldn't forget that one day, for whatever reason, he might be on the other side.
You have to be careful on how you say this.
No. You see, it's the truth. What he's fighting for is to one day have power. This issue is a national issue. When you make statements like this, that you cannot, or whatever, you cannot treat, you have 5 children, you can't treat all of them the same. You understand? You have to be very careful as to how you touch every child's problem. So if you say something like that without actually giving full details, it is not fair. Plus, it's a national issue. Help me to fix the problem. It's about fixing the problem. I haven't spoken to him throughout this whole thing. You understand? Even, hey, young man, how are you feeling? How are you faring? What is happening? What have you seen? He hasn't spoken to me. Maybe I'm not expecting him to speak to me, but fine. But I think with such a situation where there's something looming, it's more about a consensus and a shared effort. So we would have known, but if the whole chamber said 30%. 30% of what? Everybody's bill is different. So are you saying 30% of the entire 1.7 billion?
So 30% for everybody. If you owe me 100 cedis, 30% on 100 cedis.
But that was not what was in the letter. They said they should be paid 30%.
About 30% for everybody would mean 30%.
Oh, that's an assumption. So that means there's room for conversation. You understand?
So that's why, yes, of course. That's why you had a conversation.
30% of the entire figure, it will be an equitable distribution.
Exactly.
So that means 30% for everybody.
No, 30% of the whole figure.
Yes.
Then there's an
equitable distribution within that.
How much you are
owed. So those are all discrepancies, and we cannot treat all of the IPPs the same.
So just 5 seconds on this. Initially, there was some discussion about debt restructuring, which the IPPs rejected. Did it come up again in your meetings?
Yeah, it came up again in our meetings.
So how was the progress?
So the progress has been good. There's going to be another sit down to find a way to restructure it, including some operational measures that would help the restructuring feel better and easier on them. You cannot restructure debt solely based on finance. If you do that, how is the person supposed to claw back the money? You understand? So you need to find a very crafty way to let the whole social, operational, and financial components intertwine for them to be comfortable and for their lenders to be comfortable.
I see. Thanks so much, Samuel Dubik, Mahama, Council. You should miss practice. You know.
I really, the way it's going.